Hey everybody, my name's Colton for MMOHuts.com, and I am here with...
Scott Lussier, lead designer on SMITE Tactics.
Yes, today we're going to be talking about SMITE Tactics. Now, SMITE Tactics has been in closed alpha for how long?
We went into closed alpha on November 17th of this past year.
Cool, and you just...
God, it's 2017.
Yeah, isn't it?
Good Lord.
So, you're now in closed beta. It just went in closed beta today, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us a little bit about, because there's a lot of people in our audience who probably have never heard of SMITE Tactics. They may have heard of SMITE or Paladins. We just talked about Paladins in our Best of 2016 video.
Oh, nice.
You guys we gave it the #1 free-to-play game of 2016.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about SMITE Tactics for people in our audience who have no clue what it is.
Okay, so SMITE Tactics is a turn-based strategy game which is all reimagined the SMITE universe, but in a strategy game. So in SMITE, you have the third-person camera and you gotta only control one god. In SMITE Tactics, you're making a deck based on individual pantheons and controlling all of the gods. Mm-hmm. So the name of the game is Defeat the Enemy Leader. And so leaders, for people who transition over from SMITE into Tactics, there's a little bit of a disconnect for them, right? Because they're like, okay, well, they're all gods, but who's the pantheon leaders? Because in SMITE, all gods are treated on the same playing field, right? But in Tactics, right, you have Odin, who is the head of the pantheon, right? Like, he's the king of the castle. So he's the leader.
All-Father,
yeah, he's the All-Father. This is the guy you got to kill. And then it's Zeus, right? So it's been actually interesting seeing that, because people are like, oh, well, he's just a god. What makes him different? It's like, well, he's the whole leader of the entire thing.
Right.
So it's all about just creating synergies based on gods, minions, and items inside of a specific pantheon. So you can choose to either be in the Norse pantheon, have Odin as your leader, or Freya, or you can be in Greek, or you can be an Egyptian right now.
Cool. And there are plans to include Chinese and Mayan and the other pantheons as we move along. So I've had my chance to have my hands on the game, and it feels a lot like another game called Duelist, which is a similar card game where you build a deck and you control your general and a series of minions on a board, similar to how your game is set up.
Correct.
Were you aware of that, or was that kind of like, is that a point of inspiration for SMITE Tactics, or is this kind of something that like you threw the dart at the wall and it just kind of happened to land close? So
for us, when you look at our studios, so there's 2 nights a week that we always do a board game night, right? So we do like X-Wing miniature night, and some people do D&D, and we always kind of diversify from that. But for me, I think the biggest inspiration for our game was always XCOM, right? XCOM is one of my all-time favorite games in the entire world. And when XCOM 2 came out, it was like, oh my god, they did this. And then when XCOM 2 got released, I was like, oh man, I've been working on this paper prototype of SMITE Tactics. But, there's a lot of differences between the two, right? I mean,
sure, yeah,
obviously ours is based on cards and you kind of play the units. But with Duelist, once we started getting into Unreal 3, people were like, hey, is there any similarities to Duelist like around the studio? And I was like, what is this game? And then I looked at it, I was like, oh man, Duelist. And Duelist is a great game. And I actually like their decision with the art style that they picked. But no, there was no real inspiration from there. I would say for most of us, it really came from either Final Fantasy Tactics. I'd say like half of the team is all about Final Fantasy Tactics, and they look at me and they're like, when are we going to get verticality, man? And I'm like, maybe down the road. Let's do baby steps first.
Cool. So SMITE Tactics is in closed beta now. You'll have a chance to apply to get to play it, I believe, if you go to the SMITE Tactics website.
Yes?
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about, obviously, SMITE Tactics is going to be free to play.
Yes.
A lot of people, when they hear free to play, they get concerns with cash shop, how it's going to work. Obviously, you guys have executed very well on the SMITE and Paladins cash shop models.
Yes.
Nobody can argue with that. You've got plenty of cosmetics, no gameplay affecting items or anything available. Now, obviously, with this being a card game, you've got to worry about what I would call the Hearthstone effect. Okay. Where if you're going to have people playing this game competitively, they're really only going to get there if they spend a lot of money buying packs, or if they spend their entire life grinding any single-player modes or online ladder matchmaking to get cards, which can be a painful and damaging experience, especially in games like Hearthstone, where you have to grind the ladder, but that ladder is going to be losses, which means because you're going to get pounded by players that have better decks already. Mm-hmm. Now, Hearthstone has the disadvantage of already being in its 3rd or 4th expansion. Mm-hmm. This game is fresh. What kind of things are you going to do to combat that kind of experience?
I think it's kind of a loaded question, but I'll do my best to kind of break it up into a couple different pieces and really make it digestible. So the one thing, as a studio, we care so much about all of our players being able to have access to the game and be able to compete against the best of the best without spending any money, right? And, when you look at Smite, there's always avenues to get there. So I think the first thing that we look at is, well, how do we improve retention while kind of helping people along the lines of getting unlocking packs on a consistent basis. And so one of the first things that we decided to do was, okay, well, obviously, when you win a game, you got to get favor because packs in our games cost favor.
Right.
So that number we're still kind of tweaking and trying to finalize, but right now it ends up being right around 30 wins will get you a pack. Now, when we look at that number, it's like, oh my God, 30 wins a pack, that's insane. Like, you guys are kidding me? That's going to take forever. And so we noticed that, and I was like, really what this game needs is a lot of daily quests, but in addition to that, leader levels, right? Because for our game, the entire game's about the leader, right? Mm-hmm. We care about you are making the conscious decision to choose your leader to bring him into battle and defeat the enemy, right? So I wanted to create these leader levels. So leader levels are going to be a progression that's probably going to be endless, but right now we're gearing up for its levels 1 through 30. And each level that you unlock, you're actually going to be getting favor. And all you have to do to get leader levels is just play the game with that specific leader.
Right.
So very early on, depending on what we get the favor cost in, and this system's going to be coming probably in our second or third patch in closed beta.
Sure.
You're going to have the favor amounts. So if you play like 3 leaders, you're going to get probably 2 or maybe even 3 packs at that point. But we always want a way for people to constantly be able to earn it. Now, again, I'm not sure what exactly the favor cost is going to be on that, but I've always wanted to put an emphasis on the leaders.
Right.
Now, the daily quests. So daily quests, when we look at them, we really want to reward most people around 40 to 60% per quest. And there's, right now the idea is to kind of do either 3 or 4 quests per day and that people can kind of complete it. So on average, the normal player, if they come in and they play 6 games and they have 2 quests, they'll probably complete both of them at that time. So they'll end up getting a round of pack just from that. And the one thing that's never going away, well, it's Hi-Rez. So let me start with that. The one thing that's kind of consistent for us is always a daily login bonus, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to reward people for coming in every single day. And so right now it's very gradual, and then it just kind of ramps up immediately. So if you just log in for 7 days straight, you're going to get a pack.
Right.
Like on the 3rd day, it's 300 favor, that's your pack. And then before that, there's varying packs inside of there. So I think with all of the ways that we currently have inside of the game with the various systems, I think it's going to allow people who just normally play the game at a pretty decent rate to be able to unlock packs and compete against the best. Now, I know that was like probably word salad and thrown out there, but yeah.
No, it definitely made sense, and I wanted to make sure we cover that base because that's really the danger you face when you put out anything in a free-to-play market.
And you know what? It's a super terrifying experience, like very early on in alpha, we didn't have a way for people to buy packs. There was no... So like right now, our Founders Pack, it's a deal. It's a $15 and you get 4 legendaries and you get 15 packs and you get a bunch of other miscellaneous things inside of there. And I think, having some kind of a pack that's not intimidating, similar to the God Pack or the Champions Pack, where people get in and they get an abundance of things and they're like, okay, you know what, I have this, I can really start here and I don't have to worry about doing anything else, is extremely important in all of our games.
Right. So you are going to have something akin to an Ultimate Gods Pack or something like that for the game where it'll basically be like a starter kit.
Yes.
Where here's some packs that you started, here's a couple of leader unlocks, because I've only played the demo version of the game. Mm-hmm. So do you unlock the leaders through packs or do you unlock them in another way?
So the alternate leaders right now are all inside of packs. They're all treated as legendary cards because it changes the way that you actually can play in the different strategies inside of there. But really when we look at it, and when I look at the Founders Pack right now, I'm like, it's really nice to just have a direct way to buy these 3 leaders, and then even if you don't want them, you can disenchant them for Arcane Dust, and then, or excuse me, just Dust in general.
Hearthstone, yeah. Okay, cool. Slight follow-up question, because I haven't delved that deep into the game yet. In the game, are there faction-specific cards? I've only played the demo. Okay, so there are. So there's certain cards that only Norse can use, or only Greeks, or who have you can use.
Correct. So inside of each faction, well, let's just call them pantheons for the sake, because they're actually pantheons. Inside each pantheon, you're locked into the pantheon-specific cards and neutral cards, which are kind of just a miscellaneous bunch of various cards
Minions
inside of there.
And stuff like that.
Minions, and the one unique thing that we actually decided to do very early on was actually add items in there. Now, a lot of games just decide, you know what, items, it's a very dicey road to just throw kind of catch-all items in there, so you have to be extremely careful with what we put in there. But, from a design perspective, I'm like, there's a couple cards that I really want everyone to have access to, and a lot of the most interesting cards that come from all CCGs have always just been item cards, right? There's a lot of things that you can kind of turn the pace of the game, so I think having that avenue in there in neutral is going to be nice and a good way of spicing everything up.
Sure. Now, as it stands right now, the current objective in the game is kill the enemy general. That's one and done, tag them, bag them, you're out of there. What kind of things are you looking to expand to add to the gameplay to make it different, to make it stand out?
So right now, obviously, our key is to always focus on top of what's our core gameplay, right? Mm-hmm. Very early on, it's all about reestablishing the core features of the game and how it plays and making sure that it translates well to everything else. Now, once we get out of the closed beta stages, we actually talked about this yesterday where, so one of the things coming to the Egyptian map is there's going to be pots that you can destroy that you actually get one of 3 cards that you can't normally put into a deck inside of your hand. Now, one of the things that we were talking about is how cool would it be if there was a different game mode where the objective of the map is dependent on the map. So maybe the Egyptian map, we have a bunch of these pots around the map, and you actually have to destroy them, and how that actually alters the gameplay. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to look to do, but the first immediate thing that I can think of is I really want to have, a tactics game is very cerebral, right? You always have the people who like to think. So I think setting up a board with various units on there that you go, you have 2 turns to defeat this is going to be very, very fun for a lot of our players. So I think having a healthy blend of maintaining the main game mode, right, which is always to defeat the enemy leader, the standard out-of-the-box game, and then giving them, match of the day, right? Match of the day is something in Smite that always adds a lot of flavor every single day.
For it's super fun.
They log in and they're like, oh, it's 80% cooldown, I love this, man. And then it's like, oh, God, everyone's like, Hercules, what am I supposed to do? No one dies, right?
Right.
I think it was Gab, actually. There was an all Gab, and it was just like, how do you kill people?
I very, very carefully. I wanted to say that's one thing I did love about Smite was the match of the day, so I'd love to see something like that.
We'll totally do
Tactics.
We'll totally do match of the day.
Yeah, so that's very exciting to hear about that. Can you give us a timeline on what we can expect for it to become more available? Like, are you guys planning to do any kind of code giveaways, or are you planning soon to transition into open beta? I know you just hit closed beta today, so it's a little soon to tell. What can you tell us about giving access to some new players?
So I think in regards to access, we're always very, very giving in the sense of the keys, right? I mean, today I'll probably give out 600 keys just from my own Twitter. Scott Lussier will probably give out 600 keys from his own Twitter. Mm-hmm. We'll always make sure that we distribute it out there. But really for us, and the Hi-Rez philosophy here, which is very, very important to establish even with this game, is we get the game out in a very early state. And from there, we really focus on our core set of community, and we go, okay, how do we build this game to be the best experience that we can possibly have? And once we have that experience, we then go to open beta, right? It's all about making sure that we have all of the pieces to the puzzle together, and then, the polish is always going to come, right? Polish is always going to happen. Now, when you look at a game like Paladins, for example, right? I mean, they went into closed beta in 2015 October. They stayed in closed beta for a very long time, and during that time, it went through a lot of changes.
Sure.
A lot's almost undercutting it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
They went through various changes, and then, they finally came up with, if we lower the time to kill and we do a couple of these other things and we add a couple maps and we change the maps, just entirely the flow, let's just see what this is. Because we think, and they thought that was the right direction. And as soon as that happened, they saw an uptick in players, they felt really confident with the game, and they were like, you know what, this is ready for open beta, let's do it. And so I think you can expect that exact same thing here for SMITE Tactics.
Fantastic. One last thing I did want to touch on with SMITE Tactics is going to be events like we've seen with, you've got your Fafnir's Wonderland, you've got your Xinjiang's Mountain. And I know a lot of card games, and I hate to keep drawing a comparison to Hearthstone or Duelist or any of these. They have their campaign modes or they have their challenges modes where you go in with specific objectives, or they're built around a theme. Yep. Can we expect to see those in SMITE Tactics?
Absolutely. I think the one strength that we have over a lot of different games is, one, we have these really high quality models that are just inside of a tactical game that most studios would never waste the time to bring those models in, just because it's so time consuming. But the big thing here for us is we have stories already made for us with these gods, right?
You do, yeah.
Everything has already been laid out for us. So I think the most appealing thing for me is I want a PvE story mode for most of the gods, right? I want you to go down the Sun Wukong journey, right? And during this journey, you're building up to being able to defeat Sun Wukong, and you defeat all of his little armies before then, and it's very specific to there, and there's dialogue, right? I think the main thing that's going to differentiate this game and really attach players to the individual gods, especially in Tactics, if they haven't come from Smite, is giving them all the personality, right? And the nice thing is we already have the personality. So as long as we can make those experiences extremely exciting for the player, I think the PvE is going to be extremely exciting.
You mentioned something I want to jump in on, and I'm going to kind of blindside you with this question, although I'm sure it's one that you've received before.
Okay.
You mentioned bringing in the models. If I'm not mistaken, SMITE Tactics is running on Unreal 4, right?
Yes, sir.
Is this a test, or in some way an experiment in some small fashion, to upgrading SMITE to Unreal 4?
Right now, so our Unreal 3 is very, very souped up. It is insane.
SMITE's a gorgeous game. There's no arguing that.
So the current plan, as far as I know, is to keep SMITE on Unreal 3 as well as Paladins on Unreal 3. Really, when we looked at Tactics, right, and the main pitch of Tactics was, we want a game that's based on SMITE and puts more of an emphasis on the SMITE universe, and we want to learn Unreal 4, right? I mean, it was 2016. Yeah, and we haven't done a game on Unreal 4. And we go, you know what? This is a game that is extremely well controlled, and it shouldn't go through a lot of deviation. I mean, fingers crossed.
Right?
Hopefully, right? And so we knew that we could get away with it with a small team and get everyone kind of figured out. And then once we finished on Unreal 3, because we did a couple months of Unreal 3 development to really prototype the game before it got the green light. We go, okay, you know what? This game's completely blown out of the spectrum here. We're gonna just ramp it up even more because you see the potential inside of it. So, I think it started off as this small passion project, and then when you looked at the potential, it was kind of, holy shit. Right?
Yeah.
Like, this is going to do the thing. And so now we're putting more resources into it and starting to ramp it up.
Fantastic. One last final thing. Any plans to see SMITE Tactics on mobile?
So the high-level plans for me, okay, this is if I have my own personal agenda, this is kind of how I would like to see it. So I would like to go into open beta on PC, and then during open beta on PC, I would like to release on consoles. I think consoles are extremely important. Now, the reason why I want to prioritize console over mobile, for example, right away, is one, Unreal 4 chugs battery a little bit for mobile, right? It's not the most mobile friendly, but for me, and it's really just kind of like my own personal agenda, is there's not a lot of turn-based strategy games on console anymore.
There's not.
There just isn't. And it really sucks for me, looking at that, because, you grew up with, you had Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, you got Fire Emblem on the 3DS, and consoles PlayStation 4 has, Rainbow Moon, which is a good game, right? I mean, it's a dungeon crawler turn-based strategy game, but it's, and you have Disgaea. There's just, I really want to have that game that's free to play, that everyone can get in there and say, you know what, this is a really enjoyable experience, because as much as I love sitting at a computer, right? When I'm in a computer, right, I'm locked in. I'm in computer mode. But you know what I really want to do? I want to be sitting in the back of my recliner and just playing Tactics on a massive screen and just kind of relaxing, right? And I think that experience is something that is so near and dear to me just because of, how I was brought up throughout playing all of these various games on console, that I think it's extremely important to kind of bring back into the next gen of consoles.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Gandhi, thank you for joining me.
I just waved at the
where can they follow you on Twitter? Where can they keep up with you on social media?
I'm at Scott Gandhi on Twitter.
Okay, cool. I'm Colton Layton. I'm at @bottom_tier on Twitter. Thank you for joining us. I'm for MMOHuts.com. For Jason and Darren, we thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.